Welcome to the No BS Short-Term Rental Podcast, an unfiltered look into the global vacation and short-term rental industry.
I'm Mateo Bradford.
And I'm John Stokinger.
And this is our podcast. We bring the right people to the table at the right time, giving you an inside view and take on the short-term rental industry like no other podcast can.
Good morning, Mateo. How's it going?
Yeah, I'm fantastic, brother. How are you?
Good. I'm saying good morning, but I think this is week 2 in a row we're actually recording in the afternoon, so I was lying. I'm a liar.
Well, I just roll with you.
It's good.
To an extent. Yeah.
Still got my coffee, so we can call it morning.
All right, that's good. I need to get another coffee here. We'll jump right into it. Season 3, episode 21, our 81st episode. If that's when it's going out, it might be your 82nd. I don't know. We've got a couple banked, which feels pretty good because we don't normally do that, but we're gearing up. It's a couple days before Thanksgiving. We're recording this, and we're actually not putting one out. This will be in the future, but if you're thinking about it, we're not putting one out the day of Thanksgiving. Oh, I know.
Anything else you want to share from behind the curtain, Mr.
I don't know. Sometimes I like sharing some different things. I was a fan of the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, me too.
Growing up, man behind the curtain.
Yeah.
But let's introduce our guests. Introduce our damn guest, Mateo.
So this guest needs no introduction. And if I'm not mistaken, he's actually our first
guest, our first official repeat guest.
Yeah.
A year and a half later, more than a year and a half. We've been going, 81 episodes, 81, 82, 83. We've recorded that many episodes now.
Yeah.
Insane.
Impressive. It's a lot in the span of time.
It is. So if you can't tell by his voice, as you've already known, my boy, my brother, my good friend, another rented alum, which we will dig into this week, but the one and only, the one that the industry has been missing, Michael Goldin, brother. How are you?
Good to see you. We're all a family now because John's background at track and our background at rented. It's just
But we really do got to start recording these like pre-cuts to a certain extent, because like you and John are like related for real. Like and fun fact about Michael Goldin, he is also related to Martin Luther, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right? Like
that is correct.
The Martin Luther who, after the big schism in the church, created,
translated the Bible.
Right. All of those things. And I think we were talking about that walking around Prague. It's like the most random fact in the world. I was like,
we get into some deep chats, Mateo.
We do, brother.
Take us down some rabbit holes many times. So.
I'm the only one that falls down the hole like I fell in Prague.
That was for other reasons.
Yeah.
A little too much.
But all that to say, welcome to the show, brother. Welcome back.
Appreciate it. Honored. I'm the first repeat and the lucky number 81, 82, 83.
Yeah, we don't know. We're just gonna say you're one of those lucky numbers. I'm pretty excited to have you back.
But it's not really nepotism. There's some cool shit going on. Like, I don't know if people have I've noticed you haven't been as heavy on the conference circuit or in as many places, but I think I'm spoiled because I get to talk to you. So I know these things, but you have some really outstanding things going on, man. And one of the reasons that we definitely wanted to have you back on was to talk about that. But let's what have you been up to other than Good Morning Hospitality, brother? There's some things you need to tell the world about that we want to dig into. So speaking of background and who you're related to.
Well, but before you get into it here, and a quick pause here, when we first had you on, we didn't really know each other. Like we had, at that point we had like stumbled past each other a few times at a conference, but we never, I'm like, who's this tall guy? Who's this tall drink of water? But never really connected on, for whatever reason. First true introduction, first true conversation was probably on the podcast. Mateo and I had been together for quite a while as far as, friendship and whatnot. But since then, we've had multiple times to go ahead and get to know each other outside of this. And I feel that I feel that I'm more equipped to be on this podcast with you this time around than I was with our first podcast. So
Well,
stoked to have you on.
that's how Will and I started Good Morning Hospitality. Was I was a guest on his show, and we kind of like, dude, that was great. We riffed really well together. We should just do this, together. And we did. And similar to our chat, episode 1, we've been on stage together at conferences,
Yeah.
and we've kept in touch with the different moves that we've made since the time, the first chat. So yeah, it's cool to see, the industry as big as it is. I think everyone also knows how small it is too. So appreciate you guys having me back and letting me kind of tell this storied story and what we're working on and how it ties in with John. So during COVID lockdowns, my wife and I were just kind of spitballing of what we're going to do when we're rich and retired young. Very far off of that now, not so young as we were. And I said I want to own a castle, and Kristen said, "Well, as long as it has stables for my horses, then that's fine." So I was like, "Boom, perfect! I'm going to go own a castle. How do I go own a castle?" We took a trip over to Ireland 2 years ago, stayed in a beautiful castle hotel, and realized like these places are all over the UK and Ireland. So I came back, I talked with a couple people, co-founder of mine now was planning his wedding in England, and they wanted to get married in a manor house, but couldn't find one because all of the searches on OTAs are built for cities. If you're talking a tiny little town in the English countryside, it's hard to find. And
What is a manor home? If you wouldn't mind, like that, specifically, what is a manor home?
yeah, manor home, a lot of Americans, including myself, when I got into this, would have called it just a castle or a palace or something. But it's some stately home that was owned by a noble person. Doesn't have to be royalty, but they were land owners and title owners, lords, ladies, earls, different titles throughout different regions. But they were stately properties ranging in size from 8 to 10 bedrooms to 100 plus. So they can vary quite differently. But if you look at them, they're inspiring, and there's stories that can be told from these properties, and probably some really cool things happen and probably some really dark things happen at
Right.
places. So when we decided we wanted to launch a collection and ultimately a brand, what we found was there's this link to all these properties through ancestry. The second property that I signed up in our portfolio, it's called Fenton Tower. It was my 15th great grandfather's property. No one in my family knew about that. I was just doing some history on the property before my call with them, and saw a name that looked familiar because I had done my ancestry before.
Right.
And cross-referenced it, and sure enough, it's the same guy. And then you do the
That's
math.
insane, by the way. That's insane.
That's crazy. Can we talk about this 15th grandfather? Like, so even going back, but the fact that you can even know that, right? Like, it's insane to me. But it also, I think it speaks to the draw and the allure of what these manor homes and castles and estates, like, all of these properties have stories, and the majority of these stories are unknown, right? Because throughout Europe, you just mentioned the UK and Ireland, but Spain, Italy, Portugal, like they're littered, like literally, like spread out through all
France
of
has
these
more per
lands.
capita than anywhere.
Word, right?
Right.
So that is dope, man. So how did you like keep running it down? Like you found out you were connected, and there's an amazing link with ancestry, no brand or strategic partnership there. But where does this go from there? Because it's like I'm assuming these are broad ranging and broad reaching, right? Like, look at
Yeah.
where you are. You're in Georgia, like, and this estate is how many thousands of miles away, how many generations back? Like, the power in connecting those dots. Yeah.
So going back to 15, 16 generations, you're talking probably close to 1 million people alive today that are also related to the same person.
Right.
So it seems really cool and unique. And it is like, 1 million out of the 8 billion people that are alive. But you start doing that, that property had maybe 10 owners through history. And so now you're talking, you know, total back and napkin math, but call it 10 million people. That's one property. And
Right.
we signed our 42nd and third today. So like multiply that out by all these different properties. You know, everyone that's traveling these days wants an experience. Like we talk about experiences a lot in hospitality, but there's no stronger experience than showing up to a place that, like, had that person not existed, neither would you. And like thinking about all the things that happened there that had to have happened for you to be here, but also like all the historical things that happen at these places. Mary Queen of Scots has ties to hiding out in this property that was in my family tree, and the Scottish English wars and all of these like wild things about history. These places were the center of their areas for government things. We've got one property that Guy Fawkes raised money for to go blow up Parliament, right? For the 5th of November. So there's just wild stories that come out of these, and the connections that you can have to these different stories and people
It's so
is
different.
the experience.
It's so different too. Think about, North America, think about United States in general. We are a melting pot for over time of everyone either coming to explore or escape or rebel or whatever the case. They came to the US and North America at that time over centuries to create a new world and a new life for themselves. But they all came from someplace like other than Native Americans, those people that were here previous to us, to settlements coming over, they all came from Europe or Asia, or mostly Europe, and they stand and so to follow this lineage back, and it's into a relatively small area. Like if you think about Europe in general and the size of Europe in these countries that it's representing compared to the size of the US and the geographical landmass we are here, it's relatively close. So you have a couple that comes from two different lineages that want to go ahead and explore where they both came from. They might be in two separate countries or three separate countries because there's been breakings of that lineage over time, and divorce and all this different shit that we are very prone to here in the US makes it even more complicated, but also even more exciting in more ways to go ahead and connect it. Hey, I'm half this, I'm half that. This my on my father's side was to this, on my mother's side was that. It's super friggin' interesting to me. I could nerd out on this like pretty deep, and that's the draw for you. Like
Exactly.
I love what you all are building because like I'm a guy that can nerd on this that's done zero homework because I just haven't found the time to do it yet. My wife, on the other hand, has done homework. My sister's done homework. My family's done homework on this. I'm just like listening to the stories. I'm like, oh, this is so cool. Someday maybe I'll do my own homework, but I
Yep.
don't.
Well, in most families, there's someone who's done it, and if one person in the family's done it, then that family knows, right?
Right.
And if that family finds interesting bits, I know my mom's clamoring to go to Fenton Tower in Scotland because, like, her sister, her brother, all the kids, like, you just need one or two people to do it. And whenever a question about our family lineage comes up within my larger cousins, aunts, uncles, everyone asks me, right?
I bet it's even more now, right?
Yeah, it's a lot. So, and there's a lot of misconceptions that happen too. But what you just described, John, is the number 2 most common hobby for Americans, which is genealogy. I think number 1 is gardening. So people love to dive in. They love to know who they are, where they came from. And we want to be a bridge between the ancestry and the history of these places. Some people love World War II history. And we've got some properties where the prime minister of Poland, right after the Nazis invaded, stayed at this one hotel, Rubens at the Palace in London, for years, and basically tried to run the country from there. There's one place up in Scotland that D-Day was planned out by Eisenhower and Churchill together, like at this property. So our goal is just to tell all these stories and just build content to where people can have this tie and this relation with these places and remember it, go and experience it. Like the days of having a beach vacation, like those are great for family memories, but the stories you tell after you get home from, an ancestral trip or even staying in a place that has such insane history, it just reverberates.
100%. And let's talk about the branding of what you've built too, because Storied Collection, it's super strong. You've mentioned stories like 5 times in our conversation. Obviously you got that arch there, the castle, like I mean, that's pretty strong, but the name.
It's actually 2 bookends too. So it's bookends with the little arch for the castle.
Okay.
So yeah, connect that part, Michael. So like, let's talk about the vision, like even with the creative spark and like what you've done with that book. And like, how did this come from like, wow, this is cool. This is amazing. People love this. You're connecting the hobby of ancestry research, or that the need and the desire of people to have that, bringing it into hospitality, because it is, it could be a double-edged sword, right? Like there's good and bad with each of these properties, right? Like it allegedly, as history has taught us, like the story's not always a great one and a grand one, but it's a real one, right? Yep. And it's part of the human story. And one of the things I love about what you guys are doing in this is you don't shy away from that, and you're honest about like all of this, but the connective tissue is that it's a real story, right? Affecting real people, and people want to know that story. So how does this play, from that emotional need into a hospitality demand and desire? Like, where did that vision take you?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of 2 of my interests and passions. Like I love history in general, lots of different types of history through years and generations. And I've obviously been in travel for most of my career, and no one's doing this. And we'll find out if there's a reason why or not. Right. It's still early days for us, but everyone we've spoken to, just casually even, John, your wife's last name is Campbell. She's got ties to some of our properties.
Yep.
So people are fascinated with where they come from, who they are, and people love to travel. And ancestral travel or heritage travel is a trend that's just continued to go up and up through the years, traveling back to where your grandparents or 10 times great grandparents. I've been in the South most of my life, and everyone here, and I'm sure it's the same, in Portland or up in the wintry cold lands, but everyone has this, oh, I'm Scottish, or I'm English, or I come from Ireland. Like, I mean, I'm 10 generations Georgian, but I'm still Scottish, right? Which is a weird thing that doesn't happen in any other countries in the world. But in America, we do that. So how it ties in, I think we kind of just fumbled into it a little bit. Our original name was not Storied. It was Castay, because we were focusing just on castles, people staying in castles.
Thank God for the edit. Wait,
Yeah.
really? And I say this because I love you, and I would tell you the same thing on this pod. Castay?
Exactly.
Was that your idea?
No.
It's okay.
Who you throwing under the bus?
Yeah.
Nobody. I'm not throwing anybody under the bus. But I mean, I ran with it. It's a castle. You stay in it, yada yada. But we were meeting with one of the first companies that signed up, and they're like, "Love what you're doing, love what you're building, hate the name." And we're like, "All right, we'll change the name." Enough said. So
Up, definitely, you know, plus one, plus one, plus one.
I'm with you. That would have been my thing too. We got to talk about that.
So here
No,
we
you're
are.
good.
Yeah. But and the cool thing is, like, Castay, we were only looking at castles. Now we've got manor houses, we've got townhouses like in city centers that have cool stories that tie into it. It
Well, it's the
broadens.
story. I mean,
Yeah,
it's the
Exactly.
history. I mean, that's
yeah.
the whole point. You know, and I love this pivot, and I'm glad you caught it early. I'm glad your prospects or your first signees.
Thanks, Suze.
I'm glad that that was caught early, because I mean, this is so much stronger, and it really is. It's the tie to the ancestry where a Castay is not. Castay is like, hey, you're going to stay at the damn castle, which
Right.
is cool, and like I'm down, right? Don't get me wrong, but storied, like that's what pulls on those heartstrings. That's what pulls on that what you're trying to do here. And you know, to build on that, like I've been following your social, and it's really cool. It's cool to see. And I'm not an F1 or IndyCar guy, but like you got a you got some cool people that are getting behind, that are investing in what you all are doing. So I can't recall the name. I'm sure you can on the top, you know, but you got some.
Romain Grishon.
Okay, perfect. Romain Grishon. Shout out to Romain. It's cool. Like, and like you're getting investment from people that are out there in the space, and you got a lot of cool ideas that you shared with us. And I don't know what you can share with the podcast about where you're taking, like, you know, where you have this now, and you're growing your inventory. And I'm not saying that's easy, because we're all in sales, and growing inventory is not easy, but you're doing what you're doing, and it's moving in a positive you know, direction. But you got some really cool ideas to take this next step further, and you got some neat partnerships that are coming out of this. Is there anything you could talk about with us?
Yeah, I mean, I think broadly speaking, we have incredible stories. We have lineages. We are fishing in ponds that no one else is. And that's the goal and the innovation of what we're doing. We're not a luxury hotel chain. Those are cool. Everyone likes luxury. Not everybody can afford luxury. The properties in our collection range from $120 a night to $1,200 a night.
Right.
We don't discriminate on price. We do have standards that each property has to meet in terms of guest satisfaction and cleanliness and all of those typical things you'd want out of a hotel. But what our thesis is that people will go stay in places that they are drawn to, and they can be drawn to, maybe they own a clothing company and they sell rain gear. The inventor of the raincoat owned a castle in Scotland that is in our portfolio, right?
Right.
It could be anything. They could be obsessed with Guinness beer. The son of the Guinness family that took over the brand owned a castle in our portfolio. It could be a personal tie with your ancestry, or it could just be an interest. And the more content and the more stories we can get out there, the more we assume people are gonna book. So, I mean, a lot of things are on the table right now. There's some partnerships that are pretty obvious that we're getting close with. So I think more to come there, but we're not bidding on keywords competing with Airbnb and Booking.com.
Well, and let's and I love that.
Yeah,
And
that's because
keyword
that's
is
the only other ones that you see, right, in the space that have the ads on TV and that are throwing those things out there, right? It's
and for our listeners, like, this is not, you know, we are the No BS short-term rental podcast. You know, this is, you know, we have Michael on because this is really cool. This is hotels. This is not a short-term rental. It's different. It's hospitality, and Michael comes from our world, and he's our brother, and what he's doing and what they're doing is absolutely amazing. But you know, this isn't a Verbo properties. These aren't short-term rentals. This isn't vacation rentals. It is a hotel. It's set up like a hotel. It's run. Everything is operated in a hotel space, but a focus on
And
wait,
and
I can't rent.
that's
Can I rent the whole castle if I want to?
so yes, and that's
Oh.
our starting point. Hotels are easiest to monetize.
Yeah.
There's, we've got 2,200 rooms now and growing literally every day. So it's easier to sell, one room at $400 than an entire castle at 20 grand.
Yeah.
But there are properties in our portfolio you can rent the entire thing.
Mhm.
In the US, we don't really have this type of property, but in the UK and in Ireland, it's called exclusive use, where
Mhm.
you basically get staff of the property, but the whole property is yours. It could be 8 rooms, it could be 20, it could be 50. The whole place is yours, but it comes with service. So we don't have any like pure pure play. Here's the keys, you go do your own thing. But we do have places that are full exclusive use properties.
And my
But
bet is you're coming to that instant agenda and you're building an experience and it's catered and you're talking about full use. You're setting all this up ahead of time. So it's again, it's an experience.
yeah,
And that's what you're selling or the tickets to experiences.
So,
exactly.
and that's my question too, though. Like, it's got to have your fingerprints all over this. So, I know you're bringing parallels in some of the things from the industry into this experience because it's not traditional hotel hospitality either, right? Like, are there, you know, will there be a crossing of the worlds, like a mending of the worlds at a certain point?
Yeah. And I don't know when this is going to air or if my co-founder is going to kill me for mentioning this too early.
Ah, we'll cut it
But
out if we need to.
but we signed Hampton Court Palace, which is part of like the Queen's palaces across the UK. Like the Tower of London is also in this historic royal palaces collection.
Oh wow.
Oh,
They
damn.
don't rent it out to anybody. You have to go through them.
Mhm.
But we just listed Hampton Court, which is check it out. It's unbelievable. We can have the link in the show notes.
Yeah.
Click here. Uh, but they want to start bringing instant bookable to these places. If you want to
Oh,
get married at it, or you want to host a party, click. How many people? What date? 45 grand, right? And instead of touring 3 of the palaces and all of that, they want to get with the times and have properties booked instantly. So I think we can bring some technology and some insight to some properties that have done things pen and paper, old school style for a long, long time, just to make it better for everybody. Now, yeah, if you want to bring in your own chef for an event, you want whiskey tastings or golf outings and all that, like you can certainly do all of it. But like Hampton Court, for example, you want to get married at a freaking palace in London, do it. And we're the first company that's not going directly with them that the property's on.
Wow, this is
I love that.
yeah.
I love that.
Yeah,
And
this
whenever we need to put this out, just let us know.
Yeah, look, the listing's up, so
That's definitely the stuff that fairy tales are made of right there. That's one of the premier ones right there.
now you can't
We'll-
stay in
we'll
that one.
record-
That's for events, but we also have a property right across the street that it's called the Mitre that you can book and stay in. It's literally
But you can
walk
get married
across,
there.
crash in.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's pretty phenomenal.
So you want to act like a queen getting married? There you go.
Yeah, and
Okay.
someone has the budget for that. I don't have the budget for that, but someone does, and these experiences are like I
Yeah.
couldn't imagine, and and that's what's it's so neat about it is to go ahead and picture yourself and as a history, you're a history buff, right? And you think about how it was back then, and even getting up and your day to day, your day to day was like. There's a lot of times that we're just sitting around the house. My wife and I were like, "Huh, if only we didn't have all this tech, and if only it was like a little simpler." Or it was still hard. It was different. It's a different type of life. But to go ahead and experience parts of that, even is really cool. And like this is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, we want to get to the point where we're hosting like themed parties. Bridgerton, I don't know if you guys have watched it, if your wives have.
I've heard of
Encouraged you
it, but
to.
I haven't watched it. Nah. But keep
It's
going.
it's actually good, Mateo. Give it a shot.
I've heard. Look, I don't. You know, I don't watch a lot of TV anyway, so it's. I
The Downton
yes.
Abbey, I couldn't get into. Bridgerton was entertaining.
Yeah,
Um,
I couldn't get into Downton Abbey. I'm more of a Peaky Blinders esque, you know that
I have gotten into some Peaky Blinders.
but
It's
like pop
different
culture
time.
right now is very kind of UK heavy, with The Crown, with the Queen's passing. Like
yeah.
there's a lot of interest around these properties, manor houses, castles. It's I think timing is good for us from that standpoint. But back to your question earlier, Mateo, like there's lots of spinoffs we can do, and we want to have a Bridgerton themed party at one of our places. You can theme parties based on the place and draw audiences based on those themes, and that's how you build a brand that people want to like. These places are old and stuffy for the most part, and we want to bring some life into them and make history cool and have younger audiences drawing out places you can put on the attire from those years and roll up in a horse-drawn carriage and pop out with your cane.
No, I could
But
totally
there's
see you doing that. I could see you totally. Like, I just close my eyes and thought you with your cane and your. Oh, it was
yeah.
more like a scepter though.
Yeah.
Hey, even better, even better.
The powdered wigs, man. Just make sure your powder's fresh.
So we'll invite the podcast out when we do an event, but like there's just a lot of cool angles we can do that I think a lot of brands might be scared to do or aren't innovative enough to think of.
Well, I mean, you're putting yourself out there, right? You're putting yourself in and that's the scary thing and the exciting thing about doing something that hasn't been done before is like, all right, how do we go ahead and put ourselves out there? Because you have a gut feeling, and it's more than a gut. Your gut is backed up by a lot of talk and a lot of interest in exactly what you're doing. But the problem behind that is there hasn't been a ton of money thrown at it yet in this way specifically.
Yep.
And great. So you're betting on yourselves and you're betting in your ideas. And there's nothing I like more in entrepreneurship that is groundbreaking and doing something different and exciting that like you're the first. There's going to be other companies trying to replicate what you're doing, and they might already be doing it because they're like, holy fuck, we missed the boat, or we better jump in right now. Don't do it. Hashtag don't do it. Let's let these guys have a run at it for a little
We've
bit.
already had two of those calls. One of them said we beat them to it and they want to invest.
Nothing wrong with that.
Not mad at that at all.
Yeah, and there's one more that has a lot of interesting angles that we're chatting with, ways to explore, tying it all in. So yeah,
That's cool. I mean, that's what is exciting about, and that's why like we love what you're doing here. It's really, really cool, man. Like, and like, we've talked offline, like about some of the other stuff you got going that, you're not going to mention now. And it's exciting. Like,
it's very exciting.
you got some
It's
cool
out
stuff.
of worlds that I've ever been in before, which is fun. Like I love being able to shift from short-term rentals purely for the past 7 or so years and learning a lot more about hotels and operations, learning about, leveraging what I've learned in partnerships with what we're doing in various different partnerships, learning different worlds from LA to New York to all over. It's just this.
Read between the lines.
Yeah, it's exactly. It's somewhere that we never thought getting into it we would be in LA, right? But
Right.
there we were, and things are looking pretty solid. And I'll fill you guys in offline a little bit more, but hopefully more to come publicly there in the coming year. So it's again kind of taking a model that's existed forever, hotel brands, hotel collections, and just doing it a little bit differently. We're not reinventing the wheel. We just are looking at it from a different lens and a different perspective. And our rates of signing on properties were 45 days ahead of where we were expecting to be. Like we wanted to launch with 15 properties. We launched with 28. We wanted to end the year at 50. We're at 45 now. We've got
How big's your team?
We have 4 full-time and 2 part-time.
Unbelievable.
That's amazing.
And everything's
Yeah.
bookable too. We've had
Yeah.
bookings roll through, like we got money coming in. So I've talked with guys from big companies and they're shocked that, how much money it took us to go from 0 to our first dollar in.
Gotta work.
Um,
Gotta get
but
bookable.
That's the fun of the scrappy startup though, and entrepreneurship. Like we can do things really fast, really cheap and run. I think a lot of bigger company people want to be slow and methodical and make sure they don't make mistakes.
If you break
We've
it,
made plenty of mistakes.
Yeah.
But
if you break
Yeah.
it and you make a mistake, you just pivot. And that's a wonderful thing about being so nimble and so lean is like, you know what? Like, just run. Like, you're going to break something. It's going to, you set expectations with your partners ahead of time. Hey,
Yep.
we're going to try this. If it doesn't work, we're going to own it and we're going to take care of it and we're going to fix it. It's not hard. It's not rocket science. And I hate using that analogy but like, it's really not hard. It's just, it gets harder with the more red tape you have to deal with and the more people check marks have to be checked and that's when it gets hard. Ultimately, if every one of these larger companies could just make themselves leaner, like then you'd actually get places, and shout out to, and I guess I'm bringing it to Hopper. Shout out to what we're doing at Hopper is we do run like really fast and we break things and it's a huge reason why it is so successful and is skyrocketed as fast as it has is because we don't have to, the verticals work independently of each other. And so that's pretty nice. And so that's a neat combination or a hybrid of being super, super lean and small startup, but also being,
having hundreds of millions of dollars behind you.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Well, and I mean, you're no stranger to these small, lean startup worlds. Rented, noise aware, like
Yeah, they've been great learning lessons, and you take the pros and cons that you learn throughout and apply it. And I think, culturally speaking as well, like Americans tend to hit the gas pedal a lot heavier than Brits. One of the other companies that I'm referring to that approached us recently, like you guys executed super fast and super well. Like, how do we get involved?
Right.
So it's the fun part. It also can make you want to pull your hair out sometimes of like, how do we do this? But you figure it out. And we've got a strong team. Like the guys and gals on our team have done stuff before. They've been in startups. They've seen it. Justin was employee number 10 at Airbnb and stayed there 10 years. Like he's seen what a
Right.
rocket ship looks like. And we throw the term around rocket ship in startups a lot, but like to see it from 10 people to 10,000, like that's nuts.
Yeah, it's insane.
So it's been a lot of fun, man. And I look forward to sharing updates with you guys personally and maybe being the first person that's on 3 times in a year or so, sharing some cool.
I mean, you set something up at these castles and manor houses. We can talk about
All right.
something. That's
We can
You're
figure
gonna be
that
on
out.
that Good Morning No BS before you know it.
yeah,
That's
right.
Hey, there you go. There you go. If you're watching on video, he's got this amazing Good Morning hospitality mug. Hey, thank you so much for joining us, Michael. Appreciate you. Love what you're doing. Follow the link on the website to go ahead and check out Storied Collection. If you're listening online, it is storiedcollection.com. Don't put 2 R's in it because that doesn't spell storied. I tried that.
Yeah, well, and the notes, we'll put the notes in the line.
Yeah. So check it out. Super excited to have you on. If you like what you're hearing on our podcast, make sure you smash that like button if you're watching on YouTube, and make sure you go to what was that? Spotify and give us a like there. Go to Apple Podcasts, give us a like, leave a review. More reviews, the better. We appreciate all your support. We're excited. We got some really special, big podcasts coming up here in the month of December. Maybe right after or even before this, whenever this one ends, you might have already heard it. Who knows? But excited again. Thanks so much for joining us, Michael.
Thanks for y'all's support. Enjoyed it.
Always, man. Thanks for coming.
This podcast is a Hospitality.fm production.